Hello and welcome to this very special live BAFTA Q&A event for The Assistant, Kitty Green's searing study of a young woman working underneath a powerful film executive. I'm Beth Webb, contributing editor for Empire magazine, and I am so thrilled to be joined this evening by filmmaker Kitty Green and the film's star Julia Garner. Hello to you both.
Hi.
Hi, thank you so much for joining us this evening from your various living rooms, back gardens, wherever you are right now. If you're at home and you have a question for us, please do use the Q&A option on the Zoom window in front of you. And if you do need to use the captioning option as well, you can also find this on the Zoom window just at the bottom of the screen there. So without further ado, Kitty, if I could ask you, this was not the film that you'd first set out to make. Could I ask you what made you shift the focus of The Assistant to a young woman breaking out in the film industry?
Yeah, well, thank you for having us, firstly. But I don't know, it wasn't as if it wasn't the film I was trying to make. I actually was interested in what I had heard about sexual misconduct within the film industry. I was hearing a lot of stories. This is pre the rise of the Me Too movement, pre people speaking out about what they'd gone through. But I was hearing a lot of stories about that, and it was very concerning to me. And so I was looking at working around those issues, like making a film about consent and power structures and kind of all of them, sexual harassment, etc. But at the time, I couldn't get those stories out of film industry professionals. So I had to shift focus a little bit. So I started going to college campuses and chatting to students, because in the US, that's where those conversations were happening at the time. And then the Weinstein story broke, and people were starting to speak up, and I was able to shift focus back to kind of the topic I was originally interested in, which was the film industry. So yeah, it was just sort of a bit of a bit back and forth in order to get it made. But yeah, that's how it got going.
And you spoke to, it was nearly 100 women who'd worked in a myriad of roles across the industry. Did you find there were any common themes or certain aspects of the stories that seemed to correlate, or did you see any trends within the stories that you were being told?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I started with women who worked for Weinstein and the bigger, kind of more, famous, I guess, in that sense, or kind of the bigger stories. And then I just kind of branched out to other women who were working in agencies and all over in studios. I went to London, I went to Melbourne, where I'm from, I went to LA, New York, and then kind of branched out to engineering and tech and all these other industries. And I was hearing the same stories sort of again and again and again. And it was the patterns that was most concerning to me, really. The fact that kind of every woman had a story like this about feeling sidelined, feeling like they weren't getting the opportunities that the men in the office were getting, about kind of toxic work environments, gendered work environments, like all these issues. So I kind of piled these stories together and created the screenplay really out of all of those, their experiences, essentially.
Incredible. And Julia, it was then your job to bring these stories to the screen and in a way be the face of so many women, not just in the film industry, but women who have served in kind of bottom rung jobs in a myriad of industries. What did that feel like to step into the shoes of someone like that and carry all those stories with you?
Very scary.
Yeah.
As simple as just putting it that way, but I felt in complete safety and safe hands with Kitty, because I knew that if anybody could do this movie in a smart way, it would be Kitty. And that's what I got from just like our first meeting. She was very clear in what she wanted. She wanted a quiet film because the subject is so loud. It doesn't need to be loud everything. And I really loved that. I wouldn't just do this movie just with anyone, because it's such a sensitive subject. But I knew that, Kitty was going to do it in a really smart way. I was a fan of hers before. So, and it definitely was scary, and it was a challenge in other aspects too, of it almost being like a silent film in a way. And just, relating whatever I was thinking, really, the audience had to really feel that and see that without the verbal, in a way, until that HR scene.
Yeah, of course. I wanted to ask actually about what the script looked like because there's such little dialogue up until that pivotal scene. So I'd love to know, in the moments in those lengthy sequences that are essentially silent, how much of that was scripted, and then how much was that the pair of you collaborating on what emanates from Jane in what we see there?
It was pretty bare. It was really short, which I think worried some of the producers. But it was, there wasn't much to it. It was very much about, like, Jane makes the coffee. Jane makes a food, like protein shake, essentially. These kind of, Fruit Loops, has a bowl of Fruit Loops. These kind of mundane tasks, and this routine was really the script. And so even in casting, we knew we needed an actor who could really infuse all that with, like, bring life to all that, essentially, and kind of give this character her kind of emotional trajectory, essentially, throughout this day, this really tough day. So in that sense, I mean, that's where we collaborated on exactly what was going on. There's so much going on, and Julia's so expressive and incredible, has these amazing face. So just no matter what, there's always something, a little gesture, a look, a glance, any kind of, all these little moments kind of really inform the story, essentially.
Absolutely. And when it comes to the process of becoming an assistant, what did that look like in terms of, I mean, there's almost a rhythm, isn't there, to kind of opening the water bottles, to putting the injections in the cabinets, to, this daily rhythm. How did you work together to finesse that?
Well, we had that's what I love about film, is that they actually give you the time to, like, work with the director and, like, talk about things, coming from, like, a world of TV, as much as I love TV too. But so that was really nice. But also, we met an assistant, Kitty, and I remember we spoke with her for, like, a few days. And then also I actually went to obviously my manager's office is not like this office at all, but I just wanted to, because I would be the world's worst assistant. I wanted to I filmed my manager's assistant, how she was typing on the computer, how she was answering the phone. And I looked around and I was taking notes, and all of them were answering and kind of doing it in the same way. And I kind of just wanted to imitate exactly that. So I filmed it. And then, every morning I would just, like, look at that video of my manager's assistant and, and just, I filmed her, and I just imitated, or I guess I just did, I don't know, I just was acting, I did my job, I don't know, but but it was really, it was kind of hard, because at the same time I was like, well, obviously Jane is going through something, she's photocopying, she's going through something, I want to make it interesting, but at the same time I don't want to be one of those actors that is doing too much with their face, in a way. So it was like a hard line to, it was, I can't tell you how many conversations I had with Kitty where I'm like, am I doing a terrible job? And Kitty's just been so wonderful. She's been so patient with me. So
no, you're brilliant. It was very easy. Don't worry. Yeah.
We have, like, such a good dynamic. So I was like, by the end of the shoot, I mean, we've been, like, it was like telepathy. It really was,
I mean, I had an idea to beginning with, to shoot a lot of wides. It was going to be shot in a lot of static wides as opposed to getting in close. And I remember the first day we put the camera down, I think it was even by accident, a camera assistant put the camera down right in front of Julia's face, and we saw just so much going on. So I think that changed almost the way we shot the movie, because immediately we're like, oh, we have to get in close, and we have to kind of shift this more kind of, I guess, formal kind of conceit I had kind of developed in pre. So yeah, and that's all credit to Julia being brilliant. So yeah.
Fantastic. I know that consciously you've said in a lot of interviews that Weinstein is not the person that's the focus of this person. We don't see them on screen, however, and I wondered, even though we don't see who they are, did either of you have somebody in your mind, especially Julia, when you're acting off of their presence? Did you have someone in your mind that you kind of drew on when you were working around them as you were?
Like visually, like did I have?
Did you have like a mental image of what that person looked like?
Kind of, yes, but you know, I feel like everybody knows, even if this experience hasn't happened like to this degree to them, everybody knows what it feels like to walk on eggshells. And that's a horrible feeling. And you know, when Kitty said, I want this to be a silent film, I want Jane to feel isolated, I really took in her words and really played off of that. I really wanted to, I really was almost that, if this makes any sense, but the audience was almost like the subconscious, like Jane's emotions, like that the audience and the people in the room with Jane were completely separated, you know, and that created that very uneasy, isolated feeling that you really were seeing from Jane's perspective, you know, that feeling of walking on eggshells, not knowing what to say, wanting to say something, but knowing that maybe you shouldn't say something because you don't want to get fired. You want to still have a job, you know?
Yeah, of course. I think it was stressful. I feel stressful thinking about it now. But I wanted to draw on the scene, the pivotal scene between Jane and Wilcock. Now, I know, Kitty, you said this was quite a short script, but I know that this scene was about 12 pages. Could I ask if that changed at all over the course of writing it? And I'd love to know what was going through your mind as you were writing that scene in particular.
Huh. I mean, yeah, it was an interesting one. It was the last thing that I wrote, and it was always there as like I knew that was the sort of pivotal scene, and but it was kind of easier to write kind of the day and then figure out what that was. And exactly, I knew I wanted to have an example of gaslighting in the movie because I had spoken to so many women who had told stories of going in to complain or speak up or try and voice, you know, their distress or discomfort, and so often the system kind of overpowers them, and so often they're kind of left rattled, confused, walking away kind of thinking, wait, I mean, Jane leaves kind of thinking, is it my problem? Is it me? Am I the problem? Like, she's just such a kind of destroyed by it, essentially. So there was a lot of things at play, and I also wanted to have a scene that really depicted that HR departments are there to protect the company and not the employees, and that's something that I think we get confused about, but they're there really to safeguard this awful man and his terrible behavior. So yeah, and luckily we had Matthew McFadden, who is so brilliant. So the two of them, I mean, it's 12 pages and I was really worried about the length of it, but they just did it again and again and again without stopping, and every time it was like a play. It was like watching a piece of theater. It was really an incredible experience working with both of them.
What was that process like for you, Julia? I mean, it's a scene where Jane is increasingly humiliated and manipulated. Could you explain what that sequence was like for you personally?
I mean, it was scary, but also very exciting once that day came, because we, you know, weeks even leading up, we talked that scene is the movie essentially, and we talked about that scene over and over again. And when the day came, Matthew came, we sat down, we spoke about it, and then we did it. And it's exactly what Kitty was saying. It was like doing a play in a way where you didn't stop. There was nothing. It was like so in the moment and in the zone, anything could happen. And it just felt so real. On one hand, that was, as an actor, that's amazing. But on the other hand, you know, as a person, it's very hard because, you know, as an actor, like I always start feeling what my characters are feeling. And I felt like I was being gaslight or lit, and I was just like, this is awful. but it was great. It was great. I mean, I'm like, actors are just like, oh yeah, it was great. I terrible. But luckily this job everyone was so wonderful, and Matthew was also just like the nicest guy, and he was just so much fun to work with. He gave so much, you know.
Could I ask how because obviously this film came to the fore as he was rising quite prominently in the US with Succession, and the characters, you can definitely draw a line between certain traits. They're both egregious, and you know, these like pinnacles of power and their capabilities. I just wondered if that was a coincidence as to him coming on board, or if the two things were linked. Kitty.
It's funny, I hadn't seen Succession at the time, but my producers had, or a few of my producers had, and somebody recommended him. We were just discussing, kind of throwing names around as to who that should be. And his name came up probably because of those connections that you're speaking about, because they're all Succession fans, but I hadn't seen it. So I knew him as Mr. Darcy, you know. But I was sort of, I was like, can he even do an American accent? You know, it's like my question. But he, yeah, it was really, someone sent me a Succession clip and I was like, oh, I get this. This is so on the money. And it was like kind of a few, and also I just knew he was brilliant. I knew I needed that kind of actor who could really play. It's a big scene. It was really high stakes. We didn't have much time to shoot it. I needed someone who was kind of the best at what they do. So
Mr. Darcy. That's what it was. We both were like, Mr. Darcy's coming today.
You get like the white shirt out ready for him.
Yeah.
Kitty, your previous film, you decided to go down a non-fiction filmmaking route with casting Jean Bonnet. Why was it a choice to make this a fictional film when it's so deeply rooted in reality?
It's interesting. I mean, I get asked that a lot, but you phrased it slightly differently. So I have to kind of stock answer, and I'm not sure that fits the way you've phrased it. No, I mean, I studied fiction filmmaking, and I fell into documentary because that was where I could get work as a young woman. They're not going to hire, you know, a 21-year-old girl to shoot a fiction film, but I could get jobs doing bits and pieces in docs. So I kind of ended up there, and I mean, I love docs. I love kind of, and this film, I mean, it has a lot of those qualities in that it feels kind of observational and it's kind of minimal. But with this one, I had all these stories that were about really, and a lot of them were about really tiny moments that really can affect or rattle somebody's self-confidence. And often everyone else in the office is unaware of what's going on. You know, it's something like, you know, who's going to get the milk today, you know, for the coffee? And the idea is the woman in the office has to get the milk. And she immediately just feels like, I mean, I've had that happen to me before. It was like, why do I have to get the coffees? Because I'm the female. And just, it's so crushing. And yet they're oblivious to it. And so there was this idea that I really needed the close-up. I really needed to kind of amplify those moments so that an audience could read them in the way that we feel them, I think, as women in gendered work environments. So in that sense, a fiction film made more sense to me because I could really pick those moments and demonstrate them to an audience who often aren't quite aware of or not quite tuned in to what's going on in their workplaces. So yeah.
That's fair. I'm going to go to some audience questions in a moment, but I wanted to ask both of you, I'll come to you first, Julia. Do you think that this is a hopeful film?
Yes and no, you know, depending on what people are going to do, I think, after they watch the film. You know, I think it's a really important film, but yeah, I think it's hopeful in the sense where people will watch it and, you know, be aware, continue to be aware of the problem. You know, people were addressing it for a period of time because of the Weinstein, all that stuff. But the problem with this, I feel like, day and age is that news just comes in and out. You know, there's something new every 5 minutes. And this isn't something that we should just forget about. And that's why I felt like it was important to do this movie to keep the conversation going.
Brilliant. And Kitty, would you have anything you'd like to add to that?
I mean, it was written at a time when I was speaking to a lot of young women who had left the industry, who felt like there wasn't a place for them there. And so I did have a very bleak kind of outlook, I think, on it when I wrote it. And it's set kind of pre the rise of the Me Too movement. So before Jane had kind of the avenues, even the language to talk about what she'd witnessed. We didn't even use the label misconduct. We didn't know how to describe what was going on in those offices back then. So yeah, I think it's hopeful in that it shows what the past, I mean, it shows what it used to be like, and it can hopefully give us sort of the tools in order to go, oh no, that's wrong, and hopefully just speak up, or like Julia was saying, keep this conversation going, especially as we get back into our workplaces eventually, hopefully. the idea that we just pick up where we left off. It's like, no, we really can make our workplaces safe, fair, equitable, all that stuff we need to think about moving forward. So yeah. Absolutely.
You've actually said that some men have, or at least one man has described this film as like a period drama to you. Do you think that, is this something that you still feel people feel about this film?
Oh, I think men love to say, oh, well, that was a problem 5 years ago, it's not a problem anymore, as if like sexual harassment in the workplace has suddenly disappeared now that Weinstein's in jail. Like it's often like why we hate the Weinstein label for the movie, is because it's not one bad apple. It's like it's a systemic problem that we need to deal. It's a cultural problem, and we need to look at not just these kind of predators, but also just the way we interact with our colleagues, the way we prioritize who gets what job versus the others, unconscious bias, all these kind of issues. And so like, so I'm just rambling now, and I forgot what the question was.
The problem's so much bigger than Weinstein and sexual harassment. It's how people, it's exactly what you're saying, Kitty. It's how people are interacting with one another. That's like, a reality check, I guess. I don't know.
Right, I'm going to come to some audience questions for you. So we have an anonymous attendee. Kitty thought the film was immersive and compelling, but it must take some confidence to make a film about something taking place in a mundane environment, and the everyday about nuance. Did you ever panic or worry about that?
It's funny. I had the right team of producers who understood what I wanted to do, and understood that I wanted to kind of emphasize kind of the banality of sexual assault, the banality of misconduct in that sense, and just how everyday and ordinary it is. And they understood that was important. I think if I had the wrong team, I would have had people whispering in my ear the entire time saying, look, we need, a zoom shot or tracking shots or all this kind of fancy, like you need music here. Like we really stripped the film of its music. We did all these, we kind of, to make sure we were portraying the subject like delicately and sensitively, we really did pull back. And I think, I was just very lucky that it was the right team, and that they supported me in that. So yeah.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask, actually, could you describe making the film a little bit? I understand you got quite a lot of resistance when it came to funding in the first instance. What was it like to get this film made?
Well, the script we'd send it to a production company, and the female executive would love it and be like, it's amazing, we want to make it, we're going to make it, just let my boss read it tomorrow, and then we'll get back to you tomorrow. And then there'd be silence, and it was always the male boss that was, and then we'd often get these emails a few days later saying, I'm sorry, my hands are tied, like my boss used to work for X, or we used to have a terrible HR department here, or like whatever their excuses were. I think any company that took this on had to really kind of examine their own internal structure. And I think a lot of companies weren't willing to do that. So yeah, it did take some time to find the right partners, but luckily we really got a great team together. But yeah.
Amazing. Right, Evan, Fresh Stick, congrats on the film. It was so interesting to see so much of the flow of this film fit a horror genre. Can you speak to what helped this sort of tension come through? There were moments I panicked that her arm would get ripped off in the copy, for instance, despite that being absurd. It's a testament to the film's flow that you would feel that fear for her. So Kitty, I imagine that's for yourself.
I mean, there's a few things going on. The visual sort of style of it is we wanted it to feel like an office, but we did also there is sort of a lighting amplifier. We watched a lot of Fincher, that kind of really stark lighting in order to, so I guess there is something going on visually. Also sonically, we had, there's no music, but a lot of sound design. We recorded, my sound designer, Leslie Schatz, who's amazing. He does all like, Gus Van Sant's films and Todd Haynes' films, like he's the best. And he would send out all these recorders to record office sounds, buzzes and hums and sirens and New York City streetscapes. And we kind of built this soundtrack that really we could kind of create tension with the whirs and buzzes and kind of upping the frequency of sounds so that it would get louder and louder and louder. And that kind of tension, which especially if you watched it in the cinema, which a lot of people haven't been able to do because of the pandemic, but I really want to create that sense of tension. And the third kind of aspect is Julia, whose performance, it's so much of it is the way she is reacting to what's going on in her eyes, or the way where she's looking, what she's thinking. So there's a lot of tension coming straight, like emanating from her essentially. So I think that's all working together, hopefully, to create some kind of, I mean, I don't know if it's a horror movie, but
he was terrified, so that was useful. Julia, did you feel that at times when you were, as you were saying, walking on eggshells, or when Jane's put in, moments of real peril, even though it's not her arm being ripped
I was
off?
gonna be like, did I ever feel like my arm was gonna get ripped off? No. But yeah, I mean, I think when I first read the script, it was interesting. I always thought that there shouldn't be really music in this, because it's just going to make it more realistic with those kind of sounds, because that's anything that's you can relate, or that is for anything. If you want to make anything scary, I feel like you just have to make it kind of familiar in a way, and that's always terrifying. And I think that's why maybe people are like, it's like a horror film in a way, is because it's very familiar.
Yeah. Absolutely. Helen, really strong film. Thank you. I wonder how early on you'd fixed that key line that Matthew McFadden says as Julia is leaving his office. Don't worry, you're not his type, as it nails the whole gaslighty central part of the plot. Almost feels like a transcription of some of those notorious Me Too cases.
Yeah, I mean, that one was in the headlines a lot, I think, from a lot of those. Man, I'm not even sure. I could give you a list, but that's often been said. So it was something that we literally, stole from the papers. But unfortunately, that's what people were told back in the day, which is terrible. And that's sad but true.
And it's interesting when you do it, it's like, one hand, it's kind of this weird thing. It's like, obviously he's making her feel bad from like all directions. Like, it's like, well, not like, almost like, what's wrong with me? Like, just the whole thing is just like how he's handling it is atrocious. Like, just from all directions, like, it's just horrible.
Yeah, it's like the last twist of the knife, I think that.
Yeah, it's like, weird, even though you don't want that, but it's like, it's terrible. It's terrible.
Yeah, dreadful stuff. Do you think, probably quite nicely off the back of that, do you think it would have been possible to make a film like this 10 years ago? This was an anonymous question.
No, definitely not. No, I mean, not set in the film industry, not at all. And I think we even struggled to get it made after the meets. Like, we really had trouble, as I said earlier. So I doubt, no way. No. I mean, but it's inspiring. It's great that we've come to a place where we can speak up. Honestly, it's a really amazing, the most amazing thing about this entire moment that we've had, is that we're allowed to tell a story like this when we never were before. So we've come a long way. I mean, there's still a long way to go, but we have come a long way.
Yeah, I think that's that little bit of hope that we're kind of hanging on to here. A question for Kitty from Madeline. For an Australian filmmaker, you've made the most of your films overseas. Is there a reason for that?
No, not really. I think it's just been subjects I'm interested in. I often find something I'm interested in or drawn to. I always tell film students is you've got to be really passionate about it, because you're going to spend 2 years of your life on it essentially. And so it's just finding that thing that excites you or that you're drawn to. And I think often that's been elsewhere. But I am writing an Australian movie right now, so I feel I'm excited about that. It's going to be my first Australian film, which is cool.
Oh, fantastic! I can't wait for that. And then Madeline also has a question for Julia. You always manage to pick incredibly interesting projects. What are you looking for when you read a script or read new scripts?
For me, it's all about the writing. It comes down to the writing. If the writing is great, you're going to have great people attached to it, and that's also a plus too. So, and when you can make, you can have a simple story, but if the writing has like I don't know, like Kramer versus Kramer, for example, is a simple story, but it's written so well. So everything to me just comes down to the writing, and this was written really well. And I was just like, I have to do this. So I wouldn't just do it if Kitty wasn't so brilliant, and if the writing wasn't so brilliant, I wouldn't just do this.
Yeah, of course. Natasha, we have a question from Natasha for Kitty. Was sound design written into the script? And she says, well done on such a powerful film.
Oh, thanks. I mean, no, it wasn't written in, but it was always something I was thinking about. And it was something we discussed early on about I said immediately I didn't want any music, which scares everyone. And I was like, no, but we're going to have the most amazing soundtrack. And we really lobbied to get Leslie, the sound designer, on, because I knew he could deliver in that sense. So yeah, it wasn't in there, but I had a team that kind of understood it. Also, I think the first screening, when I had a rough cut, we did a really early screening, and they realize how silent it is. When you're sitting there and there's basically no dialogue in the first 20 minutes of the movie. So everyone's like, oh, okay, we need to get working on the sound now, which helps the momentum, I think. So, yeah.
There's a real stillness to it, definitely. I wondered actually if either of you, if you incorporate music into your creative processes. So when you were working on this film, did you have music or anything that you drew onto to help kind of get into the spaces you needed to for this film?
I don't at all. Isn't that terrible? I'd like to be. I really don't. I kind of work in silence. Isn't that awful? Julia, do you have an answer for that?
I normally do, but for this, not as much, to be honest, because Jane doesn't have time to listen to music. I think she's probably she wakes up so early that if she's in the car, she's literally, there was a scene I was sleeping. I don't think she's blasting music on her way. She's so tired. She's literally working and then going back home and going to sleep. So it was weird. Normally I have a playlist of things that get me in the zone for that character, but for this I didn't. And I think that's probably why.
Yeah. I wanted to know also if how far into Jane's life off of what we see on screen you went for this. So we obviously know that she has parents, and we can piece together little clues of things from what she's eating, how she's speaking to people, her reaction when she finds out she's missed her dad's birthday. How far did you go into her life beyond the day that we see?
You mean in conversations?
Yeah, did you kind of think about where she lived, for example, where her parents lived, where she studied, things like that? Did that ever come into the process of creating this character, or did you centralize it all on what we see on screen?
For me, when I was developing her, partly the reason her name is Jane is sort of some kind of Jane Doe kind of is the connection. But I really wanted her to be every one of us. And I think I've had a lot of young women who come to me and say, that's me, and I feel like she needed to I didn't want to inject her with too much personality, because in some ways I feel like this is so everyday and this is going on everywhere all over the world that I didn't want it to be that girl's story. If she was a bit of a cheeky in some way, everyone would go, oh, that's because she's cheeky. That happens because she's this, or that happens because she's wearing that. So it really was trying to pull back all of that and go, no, this just happens to every one of us, So, but we had some conversations. Obviously, to develop the character, we had to kind of discuss it. But yeah.
Yeah, I always try to, with my prep, there's obviously things on the page, but, everybody has their own internal thoughts as a person. And that's just also how I approach my characters, to make them full people. So it's yes, there's things on the page, but, a lot of times when I do my self internal work, I journal a lot, and I do it in a way where I'm this sounds crazy, but I'm half asleep, half awake, because that's the most creative time, is when you're in that dream state. So you kind of are writing down things when you're tired in a sense. And there was interesting things that came out of there. I always imagined her being or felt that she might be from Philadelphia or something. She might be from a place where she's not exactly from New York, but she's close enough that she can go back to her family in just those little, just caring, just even if it wasn't verbalized, just carrying around those little details throughout the movie, you know, energetically.
Yeah.
So
I love that sort of half state is where you're at your most creative. That's wonderful. We have a filmmaking question for Kitty, which is, what advice would you give to a first-time filmmaker who is looking to break out and make their first film?
I mean, again, like I was saying before, it's just be really passionate about the subject, like make sure it's something you care about. And I always say to people as well, it's like, make the film that you want to see, you know, like think about what do I like? What do I respond to? And kind of pick up on those. Hopefully, like if you're attracted to it for a reason, you can kind of almost figure out how and why perhaps. But yeah, so I always just say, just be passionate about it and don't try and do what everyone else is doing. Just do what makes you happy yourself, and hopefully other people will respond to it in that sense.
Yeah, thank you for that. Gail says, the tone reminds me so much of Chantal Ackerman's Jeanne Dielman. Was her work at all an inspiration? That's
definitely.
A nice comparison, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of the references there. I mean, the kitchen scene, I think, when Jane's in the kitchen is very much even like very close, I think, to Jeanne Dielman in the kitchen, making the meat cutlets or whatever she's making. But yeah, it was a huge inspiration. I talk about it a lot in the press. I just think that film when I saw it, I was really young and I was just so shocked by it. I was like, oh, the cinema can be this. And it felt like a real act of protest to me. I felt like really the way it worked with like rhythm and time and routine and was really inspiring. So yeah, we did draw a lot from that. But then again, we're also making a movie in America. So we do have to have, that's again, like probably why I want to focus on wide shots, whereas we're kind of leaning more with close-ups and soundscapes. Like we're infusing a little more drama, I guess, into our day.
Yeah. Wonderful, thank you for that. I wanted to ask about the food in the film and how you decided if it was between you, what Jane was going to eat, because I feel like it just creates a dialogue of its own in those silent moments when she's popping like a croissant in her mouth, or she's got the Fruit Loops, or, you know, it's definitely a certain type of food that she's eating. And I wanted to know how you kind of came up with that.
The Fruit Loops are interesting because I just wanted colorful cereal because everything was so bland in that office. I was like, oh, we're having a close-up of this. Let's get some colorful cereal. And then when we were at Telluride at the film festival, which is filled with film executives, all these people were coming up to me and saying, oh, how did the Fruit Loops, that's exactly what they had at the Miramax office or whatever. Like there was some connection that I was so oblivious to, but like that's what when Julia was saying it was familiar, was what was terrifying about it, is these details which often are accidents that people pick up on and go, I remember having Fruit Loops every morning and how awful that was.
I didn't know that they were like up to you and being like, the Fruit Loops, they're terrifying.
Isn't it weird? But it happened a lot at Telluride. People kept talking about the Fruit Loops. I don't know.
Wow. Another anonymous attendee, thank you both for your excellent film. Kitty, there are many production companies and producers on The Assistant. Could you speak more to how you connected with your team of producers, including James, Seamus and Scott McCauley?
Yeah, they're the best. I'm very lucky. I met Scott. I had made a little documentary that got into a film festival in Missouri, which is my favorite film festival in the world. It's called True False. It's a documentary film festival in the middle of nowhere. But they had a mentorship day where they connected filmmakers with mentors, and Scott was my mentor just randomly, and we really got along. And so he became, I pitched him a few projects, and eventually one of them, which was at my previous film, he was excited about, and in order to get some extra financing, he connected me with James Seamus. So we became like a trio of, we worked together on the last movie and we worked together on this one. And they're just so wonderful and the best. So I was very fortunate. And then we had to figure out how to finance this film. So we started reaching out to kind of everyone really, because I think, we were just figuring out who is the right team for this. And we got like all these different Cinereach, who I actually worked with before, who really do a lot of really wonderful stuff. Level Forward, who are this women-run Abigail Disney's company, that they do incredible kind of like definitely all this female empowerment stuff. So they were great partners too. So it was just a lovely, group, and mostly it's through the connections of this strange little film festival in Missouri, weirdly. So send your films to film festivals, kids, because it all helps.
Wonderful, thank you for that. An obscure question, I think, but I'll ask it anyway from Evelyn. Who operated the drone shot close to the bridge early in the film, and are they New York based? I think that's quite a crafty question, so I was just...
Oh, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to admit this. I wish, so we shot that, oh my God, I don't know if I'm allowed to tell this.
I mean, we don't want to...
We shot it from the Roosevelt Tramway. There's a tram line that runs across from New York to Roosevelt Island. So we're literally on a like a suspended tram with a camera. There's no drone. We didn't have enough money for a drone. So
indie filmmaking right there.
So we shot it, yeah, literally on a like a strange, I don't even know what you call those things, but yeah, it was so yeah, that's a cheat. Oops. Anyway.
That's amazing. We've got a question here. Did you ever struggle to come up with ideas for scenes, and how did you overcome this issue?
No, I mean, I did a heap of research to make this film. So are we talking about the writing of it, I'm guessing? Well,
yeah, I would think so, yes.
There was so many. I spoke to nearly 100 women, so I had thousands of stories, and some of them were kind of crazy and like helicopters and yachts and briefcases full of money and things like that. So I wanted really to focus on the more ordinary and not the extraordinary. I wanted it to be relatable to anyone really who'd worked in an office before, not just the people that work for some famous person. So in that sense, I had this kind of a lot of material. So I'd say the more research, the better, in terms of like really, being able to kind of put something together and never feeling like you're needing to reach or have a lack of inspiration.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to ask how you both felt after completing the film. Julia, I know that you said in an interview you felt quite lonely by the end. As you say, you isolate yourself in this film, and by the end of it you do begin to feel a little bit how your character feels and sort of what you're going through. Could I ask how you felt coming out of the experience on the other side?
Well, I felt very lucky that if the character that I'm playing was going to feel isolated, I was lucky that it was on this shoot, because everybody, James and Scott and Kitty, everyone was amazing. And the other actors on this job were also so lovely too. So it wasn't, I was lucky that I was isolated on this movie because I wasn't really isolated. But yeah, it was hard, because I tend to not notice. I feel when I'm doing any project, I feel a certain way. And then towards the end of the shoot, I'm like, why am I feeling like this, and this? And then a lot of times I'll like look back on like my journal, the character's journal, and like I'll see these things. I'm like, oh, I wrote this down like a month before, and I'm just, acknowledging that I'm feeling. So I sometimes realize it a little late, but but I felt, I had so much fun on this job. It was bittersweet when it ended for me, but I felt bad for Jane. So,
yeah.
And people like Jane. That's just the reality. So,
yeah, absolutely. Kitty, how did you feel coming out of this experience, sort of immediately after?
I'm not sure, because what happens is when you're directing it, and when I cut it too, I edited it with the colleague, the two of us cut it together, but we both had machines, and so I jumped straight into the edit, and we cut it in 2 months. We went straight into the sound booth, and we did the sound in a month and a half, and then we went straight to Telluride, and then we're presenting the movie in front of audiences, and then you're dealing with people's reactions to the movie, and people were coming up to me and saying this, or how this was my experience, and trying to like chat them through like all of that, and trying to, it was like, I almost feel like I only have just almost now kind of stopped. You know what I mean? Like it's taken a while, the pandemic actually stopped things, but I'm not sure I ever really had that moment to reflect. So it was just kind of move. And so it's going to be interesting when this is all, I feel like we're still doing a bit of these kind of Q&As and things, but when it's all said and done, it'd be nice to kind of sit back and think, a little bit more about that journey and how it did affect me emotionally. I'm sure I went on a journey with it, but
yeah, that's always the thing. You know what you learned until it's over.
Exactly.
Amazing. Well, I want to thank you both so much for your time this evening and for bringing such an important film into a lot of people's lives. And here's to hoping that it does make those changes and help to raise the questions that it's asking in this. So thank you both. Thank you to BAFTA. BAFTA have got events going on all the time. Please keep an eye on their events page. And again, I'd just like to thank you both. If you like the film The Assistant, please encourage other people to watch it as well. And thank you so much, both of you, and please stay safe and thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Marion.
All right, take care. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.